Oh, it just got so quiet. Fun.
That's your cue.
Oh, okay. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. Afternoon. You guys ready to have some fun? Yeah. Woo, 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 woo. All right. Well, we have an esteemed panel here. I'm so excited to introduce you all to them. Nikola Todorovic, an entrepreneur, visual effects supervisor, an award-winning filmmaker, is the co-founder, oh, thank you, of Wonder Dynamics and Autodesk Company. Let's welcome Nikola.
Thanks for having me.
Scott Mann is a multifaceted filmmaker with roles as a director, writer, producer. In 2018, Mann, alongside entrepreneur Nick Lines, co-founded Flawless, a leading tech company at the forefront of the ethical generation AI revolution in filmmaking. Let's welcome Scott. Kevin Baillie began his career fresh out of high school on the Star Wars Episode 1 Previs team, launching him on a journey through being an artist and supervisor on many A-list films. Last year, he joined Eyeline Studios as head of creative. Welcome, Kevin. All right, gentlemen.
Now you get your phone back that you gave me a nice intro.
Oh, it's like high school. Take it away. So I want to start today. We're here for AI. What AI tools are you vibing with these days, and why? We'll start with Nikola.
I'm playing around with pretty much everything new that comes out. I'd say, kind of standard Runway, Pika, Luma. I really like. Flora is the one I've been really enjoying lately.
Flora?
Flora, it's kind of like a comfy UI, but it's a very nice interface. I like what I did. What I've noticed, there's a bit of a pattern now. I think there's too many text-to-video solutions, and people don't want to subscribe to 10 ones that are, let's be honest, not there yet completely, right? The tech's not there. So I've seen a lot of platforms kind of aggregate all the models into one. Flora did that really well. You can kind of drop down the menu and pick which model you want.
Great. And you, Scott?
Hi. It's quite cold in here, isn't it? Is anyone else cold? Yeah, sorry.
Literally shaking.
I played with lots. I'm sure. I think the one that stuck out to me that I thought was really cool recently, and I might get the title wrong, it's either Reformer or Proformer. It's an audio tool which basically allows you to throw in sound effects and then like layer in. It's almost like speech to speech, but for sound, so you can kind of carve out Foley and temp Foley work in to do like audio posts. So it's very kind of interactive when you do it, which is very cool.
Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously love playing around with VO and bringing things to life, especially VO 3.
You said the words.
Yeah, it's just like, it's wild. But even like before I joined Eyeline, this tool that is now part of FreePick called Magnific, like saved my life. Like it was sort of branded as an upscaler. And I was browsing around on X one day and saw this example of how it was used to take this like polygonal Lara Croft from some old school Tomb Raider game and make her photoreal as part of the upscaling. This is creating new stuff. And so I was actually able to leverage it on this movie I was working on called Here to help accelerate a bunch of set extensions that basically weren't going to get done in time. So they kind of kept all the creative intent of the work that had been done, but just added those like pesky details that you get for free in the real world, but take forever in VFX. It kind of added those as part of the process.
That's amazing. Yeah, so if you don't know me, my name is Jess, Loren, CEO of Global Objects. We're digitizing the world. The tool that I've been vibing with lately is called Higgsfield. Have you guys checked it out? Yeah, so we shot a music video last week, and we had to create the artist to levitate, and we threw one clip, one picture, and we got her to levitate, and she had slime or 2 pounds of lube on her and dripping down, and it was able to create all the effects on the wall, which was pretty amazing. But we'll jump right in. So Nikola, how is Wonder reshaping the director's role in post? And more specifically, are we entering a phase where directors get real-time, hands-on control of VFX?
Well, I think directors always had a control of visual effects, just not them. I think it depends on what scale. What we've noticed, we have customers, big studios, and then we have teams of, 5 people. On a smaller crews, I've seen directors much more involved in the process. While on a bigger stage, I think mostly Gen AI right now is helping directors kind of communicate vision to the artist a bit easier. What we've done in Wonder, if you're not familiar, we basically build something to get your video and and extract everything from body animation to facial performance, camera track, lighting, etc. And it gets you into a DCC of your choice so you can kind of edit what you want. So our big bet was always, it's going to be a while until we have that editability in AI tools. So we went with, okay, until that happens, let's make sure that it exists with existing pipeline so you can then edit. Because I think the big problem we have in AI that everybody knows is it's still a pretty black box solution. And in the creative field that we're in, there's a lot of back and forward. You're going to get director to kind of change their mind past number 20. I'm sure you experienced that in your career. So for us, we really focused on like, if AI gets me 60, 70% there, give me the data I need that I can then go and manipulate what I can.
For now, 70% is good for you.
Yeah, that's still pretty good. Yeah, that goes on the side. But yeah, we've seen a lot on a smaller scale where you kind of have the directors that also turn into visual effects artists themselves.
So how many audience members have used Wonder? Okay, a couple. Great. All right, Kevin, over to you. How is Eyeline using AI and real-time workflows to enhance creative decisions in post? And overall, what does it mean for storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that we're using AI and by the way, like if anybody in the audience has like a better name to call this stuff, then because it's like artificial intelligence to me is always like, well, it's not really intelligent because it still like requires humans behind it to think, and like even the word generative kind of implies that it's like doing the work for you, and it's not. So yeah, if anybody wants to like rebrand this stuff, you can have like a global impact that will be transformative. So come talk to me afterwards. But yeah, I mean, we're using it for all kinds of stuff, from like really early creative alignment stuff, like concept artwork and things like that. On the real-time side of things, I think that like Paul Debevic and his team are using machine learning models to do all kinds of interesting relighting work. In fact, before I was at Eyeline, we were using real-time models, working with Metaphysic, to do de-aging across this movie that I was working on called Here, where we had to de-age Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Paul Bettany, and Kelly Riley for a cumulative 53 minutes of the movie. And it's a huge amount of full face replacement work to do, and everybody knows what Tom Hanks looked like when he was in his 20s. So it was like quite high gravity, like the movie was gonna work or not work based on this tech. And we were running it in real time on set, where we had one monitor where it was like Tom Hanks in his 60s, as he is today, and one where it was him de-aged. And seeing like him, every time Bob Zemeckis, the director, would call cut, Tom would run back behind the monitor and like watch his own performance and critique himself as a 20-something-year-old. And so to see him do that really, like, I think drove home the point that this stuff is like, it's a tool, it's a creator's tool, right? It's like, it really is helping one of the most famous artists on the planet do his art better. And that to me was like a really transformative moment, where it's like it made me fall in love with this stuff so much, to see how it was bringing sort of the traditional artistry that much closer to like kind of touching the final product themselves, without this sort of technological, mechanical barrier that has sort of been a necessity of the traditional visual effects process for decades.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned a director having a transformative moment. Scott, you're a director. Have you felt that way in entering this, what's the new name we're going to call it?
Yeah, whatever we're going to call it, yeah. No, totally. I actually, look, my journey has been as a director first, and then becoming a co-founder and a co-CEO was really because of the excitement of the technology and seeing the potential of the technology to transform the industry. And I think that's why we're all here now, right? And we're all talking about this. I think filmmaking is so kind of compromised in so many ways creatively, and I think that's been kind of the big problem with it, right? It's very hard to really do what you want to do as an artist. It's very expensive to shoot, and ultimately kind of filmmaking process gets more and more compromised. And I think the big unlock, is that with these technologies, when you're able to do more with less, essentially, you can not compromise as much, and you can make better films. And that's really been the drive of Flawless.
I think you hit the nail on the head there with cost and using these tools. Have you experienced that with your tool, that costs have really truly come down?
Yeah, hugely. Like I think the focus of the Flawless tools has always been really about things that you could only traditionally do on set, and being able to pull them into post-production and do them in post. So the first kind of practical use case that we actually like stitched our pipeline together earlier on was my own film where we had to take out. We had a situation where we were going to reshoot the film to replace 35 fucks. I'm not allowed to say fuck. Here,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure, yeah. So 35 folks into PG-13 versions, and we were going to go and reshoot it. And to reshoot it was over $1 million of reshoot. It was taking place on a location, a very strange environment, and we used the pipeline, which essentially, similar to what Kevin says, you're really going in there and doing full face head replacement renderings that allowed us to re-record new dialogue with the actors and then place it in the movie. So creating new lines that weren't there before to say, sons of bitches and frick and the rest of it. And that was the first kind of use case where obviously the cost of us doing that in post was less than 10% of what it was going to cost us to shoot. And then we kind of built on that, and what we've built out, like recently we did a plug-in to Avid, so you can access these technologies in the offline environment, then the online environment, and do all kinds of things like cut and paste performance from one take to another, edit, adjust performances, that kind of thing, to really cut down on what you need to shoot.
Now, Nikola, with your tool, have you experienced these cost savings in a large way as well?
Yeah. We similarly enough, the first project we did, Joe Russo was on board of our company, so he had a really big film that we shot just before we launched, 2023. So we were able to do about 500 shots and extremely fast for this film. So that kind of taught us about. I'm a big believer building products internally with artists, because we really brought in artists that had nothing to do with our product, and we asked them, what do you need to push this shot all the way to 5 pixels? And that really helped us understand how to base. And we see it a lot. There's quite a bit of TV show also. There's a good company, one of our customers, Voxel Studios. They did a study, and I think they cut down animation for about 80%. So they cut down 4 weeks into 3 days that they did on their side.
Wow.
So there's quite a bit of savings there.
Yeah. Kevin, for you, how have you guys experienced cost savings across your slate?
It's funny. It's like I haven't actually thought about that a lot, because I think what I'm a lot more excited about, I think there's generally we are, is like not necessarily the cost saving or the time saving, but is like making stuff better. And that's the thing that's always been a focus of just sort of Netflix and the Netflix brands, is like make it premium and make stuff that both for the audience members, but then also the filmmakers, is like how can we enable them to make stuff that they wouldn't be able to make otherwise. And sometimes that happens as a function of cost and time, but it's like, I don't know, to me it's like looking at it through the lens of like how do we make stuff better and elevate the craft and elevate the artistry. It just, I think, helps us to look at like the way that we're doing this stuff as a means to support the creators with these tools. And it is amazing. Like I was talking to a director who I really admire a ton, and I've never worked with before, but we were sort of talking about some stuff yesterday. And he was just like, specifically, this was in relation to some of the not necessarily AI related, but some of the volume capture work that we're doing, which is like another really cool area of sort of development, where we can sort of treat footage of actors in costume and hair and makeup as like 3D footage effectively. So it's like mocap, but with like less steps in between actors with gray suits and balls and the final imagery. But in this process, it's like it's like, oh wow, this is like, it's like I'm so used to dealing with managing reality, whereas now I can manage creativity, right? And sort of like look at those two things as in sort of separate stages. And I think the more that we can help creatives do that and focus on the thing that's important to them in the moment and get them again closer to like really touching the final pixels themselves, I think that the more we'll be able to make stuff that's true to their vision and then enable their vision to be bigger and better.
I'm hearing that creatives have superhero powers now, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's sort of it.
Moving along, so Scott, there's been a lot of conversation with all the guilds about actors and privacy and AI and specific to handling actors' consent and performance integrity. When is AI altering on-screen dialogue across languages? How have you guys handled that?
Well, yeah, I think obviously there's a whole area of topic here, right? I think that what we at Flawless, we engage with the guilds very early on, and we kind of work with them to help design out a way to make this stuff legitimate. Because I think at the heart of all of the generative AI debates is copyright and consent, right? Do you have the right to use it, right? And with actors, it's particularly sensitive, right? Because anything that is adjusted or edited, they have the right to decide on that, right? It's not the director's right. It's not the right. It's they do. And so we built into the software essentially a platform called Artistic Rights Treasury, which is a consent flow, which kind of it kind of creates the flow so you can get permission for any kind of change that is made there, and it
that's
just
sent to the actor.
so the actors consent. It basically creates a lineage of edits and choices and inputs and outputs at the end, so you've got a way to clear the rights, and I think that model actually works for everything beyond just the actors as well. Like it works across the whole the whole creative scope, and I think it's kind of doing it the right way around. I think because a lot of the problem, like the excitement on AI, and especially generative AI, right? It's incredible. Like we all see it, we all play with it, and we all know what it is. But it really having things usable in the end means that you have to address the copyrightable aspect of all this stuff, and it means, and I think right now the conversation across tech companies, studios, guilds, everything is about coming to an agreement on what that is, so we can use it legitimately and use more tools legitimately.
Yeah, I think in our pre-call I mentioned my team's working on a large film, and they didn't want the actors to be captured in the volumetric sense. So we wound up hand scanning them and SAG approved that. So I think you just have to be, again, going back to having the conversation with everyone, seeing what everyone's comfortable with, and then moving forward. So
Yeah, I think it's like, just to say, I think the more that these technologies get built out, the more the protections are actually the most important thing when you look at, and I think that is vital, and it's going to be interesting because we're coming up to another guild, like next year is another kind of get together, and I think this has matured much more. It's in an interesting spot to figure all this out.
Yeah, it's hard for them. We were just talking with the head of SAG, and it's hard to negotiate this technology as it's being built because you don't completely understand it. And as we know, the law always lags behind the innovation, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next coming year.
And how would you say Netflix is dealing with that?
Well, copyright is really important to Netflix because we make lots of content. So I think that and we have great relationships with the guilds and are in active conversations with them all the time. So I think it's like, I mean, what all these guys said. I mean, it's just like this stuff is super important to us, and I think at the end of the day, like all we want to do is tell cool stories and do it in a way that like economically makes sense. And I think that's what actors want to do. That's what directors want to do. And so I think we actually all have a lot of like common things that we're working towards. And I think that's why it's great that we can all talk about this stuff, because I think that hearing from the creators, who really are the ones that these tools are empowering, I think is the most powerful thing. I mean, it's great to hear about the capabilities from the teams at Google, and I know there's Luma in the crowd here, and Runway and whatnot. And these are the people building these, they're building the shovels, and the creators are the ones that are really driving this stuff forward. So I think that the more we understand sort of the motivations and the use cases behind how the creators are using this stuff, the more we can have like less emotionally charged and better informed discussions about this stuff.
So we've talked about superheroes and power tools. How many are indie filmmakers in the crowd here? All right, quite a few. Awesome. So Nikola, how would you balance democratizing high-end VFX tools for indie creators while keeping quality standards high?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about this. One of the things that we did is kind of the video you get out of the system. I would say that's something that we noticed kind of more of an indie side or social media users, etc. They're happy with that. That's why we build it in a way that you can really get that 3D scene out in Maya or Unreal or Blender, because that's where we see most professionals going to and really kind of try to perfect the shot. I do think there's obviously that fair use thing that's going on right now that we're going to see where it ends on kind of Gen AI. We took a different approach, and I think you're right, Kevin, to mention about the naming. The problem I see right now, everybody's grouping AI and not understanding. They're putting it in one category. And there's really like two categories, if you ask me. They're a big one. One is like, are you designing and generating everything? or are you assisting your workflow and speeding up the process, right? So that's where kind of how I would separate. We're more focused on like speeding up the process on the side. So that's really where I see that people do want that control. I think right now we're kind of that early stages. It will get there. A lot of the AI video is just not there yet. We were saying, last 2-3 years we were in a generative mode. We have to get in an editing mode. Like, what I see is that a lot of these companies are kind of going top down, right? They figure out how to generate, and then they have to figure out how do I move the camera. That's one research problem. How do I get to performance? That's another research problem. I'm a big believer. I hope we don't go in the path of like I'm just prompting the film, because you can't prompt performance. You have to perform. It's impossible to describe. There's not even English words for certain body movements, right? We can't even describe, and let alone face, right?
So imagine a director on a live action set trying to write direction to the actors.
Right. I mean, if you could do it, you could do everything in one take, right? Yeah. So I'm a big believer in going in that direction, but I do think it's going to be, a few years until we completely get there.
Or you think we're a few years away?
I do think so. I think, well, first of all, it's a really complex problem to solve. Getting something in a research space to 80-90% there, it's like 6 month cycle that we see in a research. A breakthrough happens in 6 months, but then it takes 2 years to actually get to that final 10% that you can't get in. So, and the way we operate in our industry, at least I'm talking about the high end level, right? The directors like that really need control. They need back and forth. They need discovery of the shot, etc. Right now, I'd say we're in the early stages where it's mostly we're going to see commercial, social media usage on the AI video that we're seeing. So I do think the pipeline doesn't disappear overnight. And the pipeline that we build in the studio system, and the pipeline we did, the U build, they're kind of for a reason. We can't just disregard it completely. So I do see a combo. For at least 2 to 3 more years. Until it but also depends what you want, right? The philosophical question I always ask is, most AI video tools right now are creating synthetic actors. The question is, do you really think we're going to go in the future where we're just going to have synthetic actors, right? Versus certain tools that are adding to the VFX shot, right? That are not focused on driving humans. So I would say it's a question you ask to your 8-year-old kid, right? Because they might be okay with it. I personally do not like the future where we're just watching synthetic actors. Now, obviously, there's genres. There's going to be, movies like Avatar, etc., where it's not a real human. But that's kind of like, that's what I think about a lot as the future.
Well, Scott, putting your director's hat on, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I think there's a lot more that goes into making movies than just what appears when you kind of spit out something. I think the performance, like when we say Avatar, right? You could say, okay, Zoe Saldana is performing there, right? Is capturing that performance. And it's different than if you're prompting something and something is pulling from elsewhere. A very different case. So I think the kind of interactions of how all the creatives interact and work with tools is going to be what's is starting to be built out now and will be built out more.
And I don't think anybody figured out the UX of these future tools yet.
Yeah, I
That's
agree.
why I mentioned before. I think it's a good combo. I do think there's certain things we have to stay in 3D space, because it's like you can prompt and get that kind of roulette on a lot of things, and I think that's going to get better and better. We will solve a lot of these problems.
3D, you're speaking my love language.
Yeah, no, I mean we're gonna solve a lot of problems, definitely. But I do think there's certain things you cannot solve with that approach. There's certain things that are just very minor in the control and desire. But also, I would say this: even when we solve it, there's this belief, like we've been talking about, Hollywood's in trouble for decades, right? And then when AI, we started off, we were lucky. Me and my co-founder, we kind of discovered AI very early. So we started the company in 2016. We were talking about this for years, and people, thought we were talking about sci-fi. They didn't really understand. But there's this belief, like once we solve it, that we're gonna stop, and that's the ceiling. No, I think that's a starting point. That's a new starting point, and then we're gonna push it more. And it's not gonna be like, okay, you can make something for $10,000 that looks as good as something costs $100 million today. But I don't think we're just gonna, people are not gonna. We as audience, we recognize lazy. If we see that someone made something for 10 minutes, we're not going to appreciate it. So we just don't know what that next is that's going to be hard, that tools will not be able to do. We're just going to add to it. It's like you mentioned Avatar. Showing someone Avatar 100 years ago, they're just not going to understand what you're showing, and not alone how it was made. That's what we don't know. what next 10 years? What is that next step?
Scott,
Yeah.
you see shaking.
Yeah, no, I was about to say exactly the same thing. To be honest, the baseline raises, right? You normalize to the baseline of, okay, if that's normal, then what's exceptional, and artists kind of raising it to the exceptional is where I think everyone will seek. So I do think it'll raise the level of what we're making. Like, I'm very excited about the future because I think that with the right tools and the right economics in this, we're going to see much greater, better films, more original films. We're going to see TV. It's going to push up the artistry of it all.
Have you seen anything lately that you would consider exceptional?
That's a hard. Thanks for
You were
that
talking,
question.
you
Yeah,
answered.
geez, you answer that one. Would
Everything you've seen here, right?
Yeah, everything here. Never mind, my mic died. Yeah, no, well, I'd say, there's exceptional films, right, that I've seen. I don't know if we're talking in the AI space. But I think again, these are tools that get us there. So I think that it opens up opportunities of storytelling. But what's always funny with film and television and original kind of stories is they surprise you. You can't kind of predict them, and that's the really nice thing, right? They come as a surprise, and I think that's what we're going to get a lot more of, those
And the
surprises.
tools will just remain a means to an end,
Yeah.
like always, right? It's all gonna be. We watch it because of characters. We watch it because of the story. I don't think we should. Technology's always changed our industry, but we shouldn't put it in the first place. It just means to an end. I mean, we started it because, I'm very surprised. I'm very excited about the future where, it's going to be much easier to get your project made. Because realistically, ironically, it's hardest now than ever to get funding for an indie film than ever in history. And that's really an irony because we're going that direction. So kind of the good thing that I see about AI is that it's going to help certain people get something greenlit, get something made. They don't have to move to LA. They don't have to know a producer, know someone in the studio, a place. That's what we got into.
So I actually have a funny story about using your tool, and I'm not going to get myself in trouble. But we had 8 famous people in a short film, and one of the 8 got Me Too'd right after we stopped filming, and we replaced that person with one of your characters. And redid the entire film and presented it. It wasn't accepted. We wound up having to recut everything and cut that person out. But
You replaced him with a robot alien or something, I guess.
Yeah,
Just to be sure. We're not building tools
No,
to
we tried
replace
to- we
humans
tried
with
to-
other
we
humans.
tried to,
Just
we tried to build it into the story essentially, to make it, hopefully feel like it could fit. But yeah, it was an interesting panic session. But kind of going into feedback loop, Scott. How has AI changed the collaboration between all of the teams? Editors, directors, pre, post, during, all of it.
Yeah, I think I think we've kind of focused on integrating into the workflows that I think we're all familiar with is the way we've typically intersected with our tools. So in the post-production, creative edit, and like localization workflows, and I see that as a good way to kind of make a usable solution of these AI products, right? The artists that are using them, it's familiar and you can use it easily. But I think we're all gonna. I think if you focus on kind of building tools for artists themselves and look at how they're interacting and what's going to benefit them, that usually tells you where and how to build the tool. So I think that it's definitely going to, just as a general kind of looking slightly further to the future as well, all of what is happening here is going to make collaboration a lot easier in a sense, right? Because when you don't have to necessarily do the linear process of filmmaking that it is today, it's going to start stacking and parallelizing and things. So you're going to be able to have a lot more collaboration over the course of time because you can kind of share things and work on things remotely or virtually. So I think that's going to transform how we do things. But
Now, Kevin, you've spent a lot of your career in post. Would you say you've been able to kind of move things forward and get more involved in pre?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ironically, I got my start in the industry in pre, sort of like, but that was a really interesting time because it was like previs wasn't a thing when we started doing episode 1. So we we're kind of like inventing that process there. And it was the first time I was 18 years old, so I didn't really know what I was doing, but I got to see this like new process that leveraged technology empower a filmmaker. And
How did you land that job at 18? Let's talk about that.
it's a bit of a story, but a bit like I get.
We have to.
I was like, just like a friend of mine. We're hobbyists in high school. We saw Jurassic Park, and we're like, holy shit, we need to learn how to make dinosaurs. And that led to some school projects and a job with a local company that led to a job with Microsoft. And then we were filmed by a documentary that was funded by the George Lucas Nonprofit Education Foundation.
Wow.
And so George saw us in the cutting room, invited us to visit the ranch, and then we bugged him for the next year for a job. And we annoyed him frequently enough where he gave it to us.
Wow.
So it was kind of a wild ride. But you know, that, like, I'm obviously super thankful for that experience for lots of reasons. And the main one is that I got to see how technology is empowering a creator. It just so happened to be George Lucas at the time, but like, to do a thing in a way that they had never been able to do before. And that feeling of how technology is empowering really clicked with me, and I've been chasing that ever since in my career, right? And whether it was, you know, cloud computing or motion capture, or, you know, now in this sort of like AI space, it's all kind of the same in a way of like, we're finding new ways to empower filmmakers using these tools. So yeah, it's kind of like ping-ponging where, you know, I spent a bunch of time in post. I was lucky enough where Robert Zemeckis had me as a second unit director on the last 3 or 4 movies that I was with him, so I got to like see how that collaborative environment on a set, like some of the best shots that I shot came as a result of an actor's idea, not mine, right? And so it's just like that sort of like, you know, collaborative effort that happens on set and how important that is. It really just sort of underscores like how I think wherever these tools end up, that figuring out how to frame them as creators' tools rather than something that's making stuff out of thin air is really the only way to go, because I think otherwise we sort of like strip the storytelling and humanity out of them.
Ooh, humanity.
Humanity is important. We all depend on it.
You know, as far as like the entire production pipeline, have you seen any major changes or shifts lately in from that, you know, pre to final pixel?
Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, everything from sort of the incremental improvements, like, you know, on here, we helped to do an amount of face replacement that, you know, wouldn't have been possible.
You mentioned 500 shots, right?
Zemeckis movies are weird because they, like, and actually that movie is particularly weird because the camera never moves in the movie. So every scene is a shot. So it was 53 character minutes of the movie that we did full face replacements on. Now that, you know, was obviously very creatively empowering because the film wouldn't have been made had it not been for that. So in that sense, it was pretty powerful. But there's also like lots of transformative things that we're doing. Like at Eyeline, we have a small team that's focused on early creative alignment, which is, you know, really everything that basically is empowering production designers and directors to visualize parts of their movie and really take it from, you know, we're doing stuff where we're taking really like nicely drawn concept art, making a photoreal, and then visualizing it moving over the course of a few days. And this stuff is like purely additive to the production process. Like like that stuff like just wouldn't have been possible before. So this is new stuff, purely additive to the process, really empowering for the creators. So that kind of stuff is like really, really exciting. If anybody wants to do that kind of stuff, we're hiring.
Ooh. Are there any tools you would say directors should like learn now, and something you're seeing that's cutting edge?
I mean, I would just say find the right folk to partner with, because this stuff moves so fast. Like one of the big problems is it's like if you got a day job, keeping up with this stuff is really hard, right? And with a director, like, you know, in my experience with them, and in even doing the second unit directing thing myself, it's like it is such an all-consuming job. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this, where it's like you don't really have that much time to think about other stuff, right? So I think like making good friends with people that make it their lives to keep up with this stuff is probably the smartest call.
So there's lots of people that make friends with Kevin.
Yeah.
What about you, Scott? Any tools that you're saying like you should learn right now? This is the future.
Yeah,
Besides yours.
I would say
I would definitely kind of dive in and play, right? And it's right. It is fast moving. It's very fast moving, right? But it's also really exciting. I think there's a kind of combo of terrible fear and excitement. Is a combo that most people and most directors that I speak to when seeing the new technologies. But I think quite honestly, the more people get to play with tools, the more you start to reconfigure how you're going to go about shooting, creating, and it does. I think I'm sure we see all the time, right? It flips people's minds usually when you introduce a new way and a new possibility of doing something, and that's really exciting. And I think that's
Well, I think fear is part of the human experience. What do you fear with these tools?
Me,
all the hard questions.
I do. That's no. What's the hard? Yeah.
It's like,
What's the film?
Seat you're on.
I know it's the naughty seat. No, I think I fear. I genuinely kind of fear a little bit on how people. On kind of setting up the economics of all this properly, right? So we don't just derive down and just kind of create crap. So, and I think that's about kind of, again, it's building tools for artists, it's about protecting artists. And I think out of that you can create better stories and do better, but the opposite direction that's driven by other things.
Will happen,
yeah, just sludge of shit, and that's the worry. So, and I think the human stories that you really want to tap into, they have to be told from human beings. And I think understanding the difference, honestly, like an idea isn't derived from looking at things, it's created from somewhere else, and I think making sure that is front and center.
But the flip side of that, I would say, like, you get to practice more, right? Maybe
this is true.
You create a lot of garbage, but you get to cut.
Oh, and I think it's fine to kind of, that's the other great thing about it, right? Like I think of my kids, right, who like to filmmaker, who are young and getting into it, and the empowerment of having these new tools to play with and tell stories. That's amazing, right? And that's all good. But it's also just like who's really in control of these things is probably the key bit, right?
Yeah, it probably end up being how it was, right? You have the gatekeeping will be distribution. Because we're going to have a lot of content.
Yeah.
I mean, similar music industry, unfortunately, right?
Well,
because you have a lot. It's much easier now to
like
release
music,
an album, but it's harder to get found as an artist because you don't have marketing dollars. So I think marketing is going to play such a big role.
But don't you think like music, journalism, like they both reacted too slowly and got hurt by the stuff that happened,
definitely.
And film is at that precipice, I think.
As tools, my advice would be don't just look. Well, I'll go back a little bit. Why we started it. So Ty, my co-founder, he's a young actor. We really kind of accidentally stumbled upon what we actually built. We started a company in 2016, and we were first building a bit of an interactive experience where you can have a conversation with a character. Think about like courtroom drama. There's a switch that happens from a stream into a digital double. You can ask questions. But cognitive AI wasn't there yet. This was before ChatGPT. But then we started looking, and we were not that excited about interactive. And then we were writing at the time. We were really writing to be meta. We were writing a sci-fi set in the near future that has like what happens when we coexist with robots, of course, right? As nerds we are. And as we started writing, we realized, okay, this is too expensive. But let's start looking at some of these tools out there, or some of the research that comes from self-driving car and robotics. And this is, before Gen AI, we called it visual AI, and that's when we pivoted completely. And it really came out of desire of us to really tell our own films, and we were like, how can we, do kind of for sci-fi what Blumhouse did for horror? And that's really what inspired us to start. And we said, like, how do we make a $10 million film, really, that looks like 50? And then we started building tools, started looking in technology a little bit more and more. And as we started building, about 6 months, 1 year in, we realized, okay, this is bigger than just our films. Let's release a platform. The reason I'm saying that is I think a lot of people are looking what's out there as a product. What's out there as a product is 6 months or maybe sometimes a year from what is out there as a research. And I know more and more people are looking into research. My advice would be don't be scared to look. You have websites like paperswithcode.com, which are really good, where you can find and type in what you're looking for. You can see what's all open source. They can try it. The reason I'm saying that is that you will understand the problem more if you come from a directing chair than someone who's building a Silicon Valley startup. Because Silicon Valley startup has investors that wants you to succeed and sell as much as possible, and where you're going to sell the most is social media. That's where the video is. That's why we have so much AI video being targeted at that field and not really targeted at our field. Because our industry, as big as it seems to us, it's actually relatively really small when it comes from that perspective. So my advice would always be like, kind of go in that direction. Even if you don't think you understand when you're reading these research papers, there's a lot of things that you can pick up from it and play with it. This was the first company we built. We didn't know much about starting a startup or anything like that. I was a VFX supervisor, Ty is an actor and producer. So I would say like a lot of products, I don't know about you, but a lot of products I see is just a wrap open source that someone made a nice UI. 90% of that is out there. So you can really discover this and kind of this, it's all about combining. What can I combine? Can I combine 5 different open source and then add that IP that I understand because I'm solving my own problem?
Yeah.
I think that's where we're going to get the best tools.
Well, kudos to you guys for pivoting. That's not always an easy thing to do. So I wanted to open it up to questions to the audience. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Speak loud.
Nikola, this is for everybody, but Nikola, you got me thinking a lot when you said first there's 2 paths, right, of even looking at this AI world. I would also take it a little bit further when you mentioned that independent filmmakers can now possibly get greenlit, streamlined, everything can be streamlined so much. So bringing those 2 thought strands together, I think there's an independent path to AI, the open source path to AI, and then there's the big tech Magnificent Seven path to AI, where they're basically, it's the AI gold rush. They own all the picks and shovels. They're the ones who are going to make money, not the gold miners. So, like, have you guys thought a little bit about just those two worlds? Because independent filmmakers, I would think they would want to go into independent AI and something that's more open source and not that big tech. Like, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
No, I think that's a great point. The question is about kind of two ways that where the indie filmmakers will go towards. I do think a lot of AI models will become a commodity. I do think, even though it seems it's big tech owning it, I would disagree. I think actually startups are pushing it more than big tech on that side. But I do believe a lot of it's become a commodity. I think that application layer of how you apply some of these will be the secret sauce for our industry. So I can see, just like we build pipelines for every movie, you build a different pipeline, right? Your visual effects process is different in every movie, and you build a mini pipeline. I do think we're going to have a lot of these kind of commoditized models that each production will tailor to themselves, and a lot of that will be done through open source. On top of, if you want to build an application layer. So I wouldn't bet that it's just the Magnificent Seven, right? I actually am seeing way more progress from certain startups.
Yeah, and I think there's also an element, right, where independent movies can move the fastest, can embrace technology the quickest, and you kind of model out a pipe that's right for you in a sense.
You need permissions, right? The process is much quicker. You can make smaller crews can make decisions much quicker.
Yeah.
Versus a big studio.
And one thing that's just like pretty interesting that I think is a related point is like we're kind of in an interest like. Okay, if all of you guys were to look at all of us panelists here, just by looking at us, you wouldn't be able to tell which of us was actually the best storyteller if you were sitting down around a campfire, right?
Well, definitely Scott.
Yeah, well, I was going to say Jess, but yeah, and the interesting thing is like the same is proving to be true with content as we move forward. Is like we're used to being able to like look at an image from a film or a TV series, and based on how it looks and the production value, determine how expensive it probably was. And if it looks expensive, it probably means that somebody believed in that idea, that story enough to bankroll it at that level. So you could kind of tell, you could sort of judge a book by its cover in the olden days. Now, you can't tell based on looking at a single image like what the level of production value is. But the storytelling is still the most important thing, still. And so I think that it's like, I think figuring out how to sort of like get those stories to rise to the surface, whether it's through marketing, whether it's through some viewer-driven analytics to bubble stuff up to the top, but that storytelling is still going to be the thing that makes the difference.
I think just to say, just on the back of that, I think it comes down to I think the experience, the feeling, right, when you're experiencing something, usually watching it, and how much you feel. I think is probably the measure that we want to measure things in. Because I completely agree with you. Like I remember getting my first job. It was only after making loads of short films, and then eventually I realised, I should hire a really good DP to shoot my short film, and it looked great, but it was no better than the rest, and then it led to a job. And I think that's how people used to judge it. But yeah, I think really great art makes you feel and connect.
I agree with you about the quality of the shot, but I do think also, and I know this from like our team. You know, we have artists, we have engineers. It takes years to train an artistic eye and to recognize when something is good, right? Because you can push a shot and make it worse, right? So I do think that's going to play an effect. But I also do think, to me, what's exciting is that today it's very hard to risk and make a huge film with a grounded story, with a really character-driven story, because it's so expensive. You know, I always say, if it's 200 million, you got to make 600 million to break even. You're not going to risk.
You can't risk originality.
You can't risk too much, right? And I understand why. So, if anything, it will push that more. But also, I do think people will respect, character-driven stories and quality of storytelling more than anything.
All right, rapid fire. Favorite movie and favorite TV show now, Scott.
Jesus, right. My favorite movie is super easy, right? It's Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which I think completely, that was, I would say, my training data as a filmmaker.
Okay.
Favorite TV show?
Right now, like today's shows.
What it is? Oh, jeez. Why am I always first on this?
Yeah, you're getting
Okay, why don't you go on your movies and then I'll come back?
Apocalypse Now, my favorite movie. Current TV show? I've been watching Your Friends and Neighbors a lot. Probably, yeah.
I also love that. That's actually, yeah, okay.
Jurassic Park for sure. I owe my career to it, and Drive to Survive.
What network is that?
So Formula One.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I'm a
yes.
big F1 nerd.
Okay. My favorite show right now is Paradise. Anybody? Paradise? Yeah. And my favorite film ever is Forrest Gump. So
Right.
that's all we have time for. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.